Hey everybody, Tyree here with Before I Forget along with Kevin. Say hey Kevin.
Hey, Kevin.
And today we have an extremely special guest. Not to say that the rest of our guests aren't special, but this one
It's pretty rude
is
of you to say,
quite
man.
quite a bit more special than everyone else, including Kevin, who's here.
All right. Yeah, no, hey, I guess that was my cue. Hey, so we have today Earl Plumlee. You may have heard about him. He received this medal from the president a couple years ago, and that's a pretty big deal. I'm going to let him tell his story, though. Go ahead and say hello, Earl.
Hello. Yeah, as foreshadowed by you two, I received the Medal of Honor from President Biden about what 2 years ago.
Yeah,
I didn't.
December 21.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
pretty big deal in some circles.
it's,
Not not such a big deal in others.
yeah, I can imagine. Like, what circle though? I saw some time ago, like you went and spoke to like Lawton Public Schools over at Fort Sill, and I could just imagine some kids being like, "Who are you?"
Why are we here?
Do you, sport do you play? Like, oh well,
Uh,
none. Well,
So you're from Oklahoma, right?
I'm from Oklahoma, born and raised.
Tiny little town right there in West Oklahoma.
Uh, well, technically, it stopped being a town after a tornado in the '80s. They just didn't rebuild it. But there's still a school, and there's a smattering of houses. Merritt, Oklahoma. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's crazy. Like, I've been to that part of Oklahoma. I did some time down at Fort Sill as a drill sergeant, and there's not a lot going on outside of that small area. Um, like I went to Altus Air Force Base to look at a dune buggy, and I was like, "There's an Air Force base out here." God, there's
I always
nothing.
I love the Air Force because I can just imagine, the type, I'm going to go serve in the Air Force. I'm going to get this highly technical job. And then you get stationed in, Altus, Oklahoma.
Yeah, yeah. It's like, well, I think you got to mess up somewhere along the line, and they're like, "Okay,
Yeah.
guess where you're going." Yeah.
Yeah. You can't
Um,
control
you get to
yourself
see
in the evening.
everything.
So.
what was that?
It's
I
the
said, you
only
can't
way.
control yourself in the evening. So we're going to put you in Altus. It'll keep you out of trouble.
Yeah. Um, so typically, actually, Tyree, that's your question. Go ahead.
That's my question. That's my cue. So let's back it up a lot. What caused you to join the military? It's not something that everyone likes to do around the time you did.
Charlie Sheen.
Hell yeah.
Navy SEALs.
Yep.
Yep.
At a, uh, that was it. That I saw that movie and I was like, that's what I'm going to do. And then, some other movies and some other life choices. And I always joke I was going to be a Navy SEAL, and it's the only thing I haven't done.
Yeah, pretty much. What is do you have any other family members in the military or you first generation?
No, I come from a like a military family. My dad and brothers both served. My grandfather served. It's kind of what we do.
All right, right on. Well, they do you know their MOS? What was their job?
So my dad was a fallen angel. So he was supposed to be a pilot. And then after Vietnam, they got rid of all the aircraft that he was going to fly. So he ended up being a AV officer. And then, like me, he left the Marine Corps and became an artillery officer in the Army. And
Yeah.
then
Yes. I was gonna say I saw that you were in the Marines. So, but you joined the delayed entry program into the Oklahoma National Guard.
right.
And then you said, "Nah, Marine Corps sounds way cooler."
Well, I had two really influential mentors that kind of guided me to the Marine Corps. Um, and it was the sheriff and the district attorney of Beckham County. Thought that would be a good idea.
So what caused you to like? Well, once your time was up in the Marine Corps, how long were you in the Marines?
Almost 10 years. I did like nine years and some change. I'd have to get my
Yeah.
DD 214 to look at it, but yeah, I did 4 years in the infantry, First Battalion, Third Marines, and then after that, entered a program called the RMAT program, and became a Force Reconnaissance Marine. And then from there served with 4th Force Reconnaissance, 2nd Force Reconnaissance, and 3rd Recon out of Okinawa.
Nice. And then you decided to jump ship and come to the Army?
And then I decided to jump ship, literally, I guess. Yeah. And I was out of, I joined the Army. I did all my contract on terminal leave. I had a 12-hour break in service from leaving the Marine Corps to taking that oath again for the Army.
Right on. I mean, I don't know. It's kind of a hard thing to like. I've met some folks that were Marines first and they came into the Army, and they still have this very Marine demeanor about them, and still talk about the good old days in the Corps. And obviously we give them shit for it because we're in the Army now. But when I went through the Drill Sergeant Academy, I didn't have a lot of drill sergeant leaders there that I wanted to look up to. You know what I mean? They just didn't really fit that mold for me. So I sat there on YouTube every night and I would watch drill instructor videos, and just try and get motivated that way and get some ideas on how to fit that role. And so yeah, I actually am a huge fan of the Marine Corps and how they do things, at least in the beginning stages.
Yeah, if I wanted to fix things, I would put the Marine Corps in charge of boot camp for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
And I think the Marine Corps drill instructor, it's the most professional cadre of instructors I think I've ever really encountered. And
we've had I was gonna say we had somebody on the show, Kat Karamitro. She's a former Marine Corps drill instructor. And yeah, I mean, you talk about professional, just just the way she talks about it, how passionate she is about it, how hard it is to get to the point where you become, a drill instructor on the field, whatever. It's just, yeah, leaps and bounds. I've been in the reserve drill sergeant program for a while, and they're two different animals. But so when you joined the Army, did you come in on an 18 X-ray contract?
Yeah, I came in as an 18 X-ray. So I did the first day of basic training for the Army. I got all my uniforms, and they were doing all their cattle car shit to start training, and then I just carried my boxes back to my bunk, and then basic training was over for me.
Yeah, it's easy. Well, I mean, you already went through the Marine Corps, which is way harder.
Yeah, but you know what they didn't teach me in Marine Corps boot camp though?
What's that?
How to set up and wear the Army uniform.
Yeah, it's probably not something they go over there.
Yeah, so and everybody there's like, don't worry, your unit will take care of it. Well, my unit was the Special Forces assessment cadre, so I show up like a bag of shit and instantly just start catching hell.
I mean, but did you get a chance to be like, hey, listen, guys, I was in the Marines yesterday?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nobody cared. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you should have done your research. It's funny that you mentioned that the movie Navy SEALs is what convinced you to go in, because I never really gave the military much thought in my my later teen years, but that movie, I'm still obsessed with that movie. That movie was the reason I wanted to own a Jeep, the reason I wanted to own an MP5, and the reason
it's why I jumped off the Coronado Bridge. It's literally a ton of things.
Yeah. We recorded with one of the founding members of Delta Force not too long ago, Mike Vining, and kind of was able to just kind of tell that story, and with William Branham, former Navy SEAL. So I was like, because he kind of said the same thing. That movie kind of inspired him to join and go be the Navy SEAL, and he was going to be the best of the best and all that stuff. And I was like, he's like, I did all, he said he ended up doing all the things, whatever. He's like, well, I did all of them except join the Navy. So basically a SEAL. Yeah. Hilarious.
Right. So I have to ask the silly questions. While you were in 9/11 happened, where were you and how did it change things?
Well, so I was on a UDP, unit deployment program. It's so where Marine Corps just keeps units forward for any use that might arise. So I was in Camp Hansen, Okinawa. I forget the time difference, but we were doing infantry Okinawa things, drinking all the beers. And I'm gonna date myself. We had like one TV in the whole barracks, and the guys that were watching TV, it was probably like 10, 11 o'clock at night. It was the morning news cycle on the East Coast, and they all came running through the barracks, screaming about the towers going down. And for me, I was on this grand adventure, and suddenly, that next morning, even though we weren't at war, we were on a war footing, and I knew that I was going to be serving in a wartime military instead of a peacetime military.
Huh.
That's
Yeah.
something similar that happened with us. We, totally joined thinking, oh, this is going to be a breeze. I'm going to do my time and join or go to college or whatever. But,
Yeah.
that day changed everything.
I
Kevin,
was gonna say, well, he and I were both in basic training at that time down at Fort Benning,
Yeah.
and I graduated. I turned 19 on the 9th, and then 9/11 happened 2 days later, and then I graduated 3 days later. And it's funny because I told my parents, I was originally supposed to go to reserves, and I told them, I was like, well, I came back from MEPS with an active duty contract in the infantry, and they're like, but what about war and stuff? And I was like, well, we haven't been to war in like 10 years. It's fine. And then fucking 9/11 happens.
Boom. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry, the United States, I jinxed us, apparently.
I still stand by. I thought it was fake, because this was around my first week in basic training when it happened, and I'm sitting here like, man, the CGI is incredible. And
well,
and it was also great for me for what war was actually going to be like, because we had a big formation the next day, and they're like, "Yep, we're going to war, boys," and and then they handed out shovels, pickaxes, and machetes, and I was on a week-long detail to cut the jungle back around the perimeter of Camp Hansen. And it was
horrible.
Yeah, it was. And we were, I think, I forget the shifts, but I think we did like 4 to 6 hours just chopping shit. And I was like, I thought war would be different.
This is not the war I thought it would be. And well, so we both were stationed in Germany, and I got there in October, and Tyree showed up a couple months later. And then, and we had totally have it in our minds that we're about to go to Afghanistan and do war things, and we go to Kosovo for peacekeeping for 6 months. And
so all the, we still had some 91 Persian Gulf War vets roaming around. Not a ton of them, but they're around. And they're all like, "Hey, if you want to get to the war, you better hurry because it's not going to last." Because for those guys, the war was over in 4 days. And I remember I'm chopping the stuff. I'm like, God, I'm going to miss the war. And then we finally get the call and go to Bahrain to guard ships and do port security, not invade Afghanistan. And I'm like, there it is. I missed it.
Mm-hmm.
And I still, for a solid decade, was always kind of panicky about getting on the next trip because it'll be the last one, because this isn't going to last forever. And so now I'm just looking back at this 20-year long, 2-decade fight that we were in. Just like, what an absurd mentality I had.
Oh yeah, I mean, well, and who could have predicted it was going to last 20 years, 20 plus years?
Well, there was.
yeah, true. So as a Marine in the infantry and then in Force Recon, did you ever get to go do stuff aside from chopping back the jungle and Bahrain?
Well, yes, I got not in the infantry. It's actually kind of another lesson learned. I always try to tell guys about leaning too far. I had 2 trips that were, they're not going to make a movie out of those. One was, guarding ships. The second was a, mission top secret, destination unknown. And we went to the southern Philippines and guarded the special forces command down there. So we were the Ugandans for the special operations camp, guarding the chow hall and giving out feeding tickets. It's 2005. I'm doing this recon thing, and my leadership in the infantry is like, "Hey, we can't tell you anything about it. It's classified, but we really want you to stay for this next mission, but we can't tell you anything about it. And I was like, no, you guys got me twice with this shit already.
Hmm.
And then so while I was in ARS, which is a, you know, it's a, the Marine Corps as their fashion, they copied Ranger School and Buds and made, you know, just a real pain in the ass school. So I'm getting just destroyed out there in Virginia, and I'm look up on the news, and my infantry battalion is just tearing the hell out of Fallujah, and I'm like watching all the guys I know on the news, and I'm like, God, I'm cursed to never see combat. But obviously, as a force reconnaissance Marine, there's just not that many of them. So if you're a force recon Marine, you are going to get deployed to combat. So I got my fix shortly thereafter.
Yeah. That is pretty wild though. So that's when he and I. So like I said, before Tyree and I were in Iraq in 04 to 05. So the big
Research.
Yeah, well, so we had Operation Baton Rouge in October in Samara, and then there was that one that happened up in Fallujah in November, and I can't remember what they called it, but I know a lot of Marines were involved in that. And then Fallujah and the Marine Corps have a love-hate relationship, I feel like, during that time frame, because there's a lot going on in that time.
Yeah.
But
nobody wants to be there, but everybody wants to go there.
Right, yeah. That's the good spot, but not really. Good spot for bad stuff. So you definitely did get to see some combat later on. So you come into the Army. What year was that?
I came in the Army in 2010. Yeah.
Okay, so you come into the Army, 18 X-ray, you go to selection, and you're over there at the JFK Special Warfare School.
Yep.
And you come out as an 18 Bravo weapon sergeant.
That is correct.
Yeah, that's the good stuff. That's what I wanted to do. If I never tried out, it's one of my biggest regrets. But I feel like a lot of folks, especially dudes in the infantry, we always have a story similar to that. Oh, I wanted to go Ranger, I wanted to go SF, but so I'm sure it's actually, I kind of feel like, and maybe you can confirm, you know how like you talk to somebody who didn't join the military, but they have that like I almost joined the military, but yeah,
I went down there. That's so I always forewarn guys. I was like, hey, go to selection, man. At least if you don't make it, like I went and I didn't make it, and if you do, it's another decision. Like, am I going to do this or not? And if you decide not to, then you decided not to. And I think the people that have that, like, well, I never tried out, I wonder if I could have made it. And it seems to be a little thing that they carry that little chip around their shoulder.
Yeah.
And I think it's one of those, civilians do the same thing. Like, I was thinking about joining, but for whatever reason I didn't. And so I actually went through selection with a 54-year-old man.
Hell yeah.
What?
And, yeah. And he got selected.
What?
He ended up getting hurt in the Q course, right? Because the selections, it's bad, but it's over. It's whatever, 22 days. You can take anything that long. But through the Q course, he just wasn't able to heal up. So we would do stuff, and it's like a year long of a pretty vigorous physical activity. He just couldn't hold up. But he'd always wanted to join and decided to act on that and joined as an 18 X-ray and went to selection.
That is awesome. That's badass.
Yeah.
I would have been one of those guys. Like, I was gonna join, but I'm just way too fragile.
Yeah.
No way. No way. Like, be honest. Be honest. That's the best policy. I was going to win, but I just couldn't. I know I couldn't make it. Hats off to you guys. Tell me a little bit about the team mentality of training at that point. Now
So that's one of the things I like about elite units, and I found it to be true on both sides. As a Force Recon Marine and as a Green Beret, it brings like this collectiveness together. You can't do those schools alone. They're just too hard, and you're gonna have your peaks and valleys. And so it's just as important to people around you as it is just being emotionally strong yourself. But it really brings people together, and you see those bonds. I'm closer to the people I've served with than most friends and family, before or after that I've met. And but that's something I just really like about this is once you start getting hammered like that, it really strips a lot of the what I call the fake veneer of society off of a person, and you just get down there to the meat and potatoes of their personality. And it's just really it's a really neat environment, and I always pity people that haven't really got to be around 30 or 40 people that literally you can trust your life to, let alone your wallet and your comfort, but your actual well-being and your future. And it's a neat feeling to like just to be able to be completely vulnerable around people.
Yeah. Obviously we didn't do special operations, but I mean, after our time in Iraq and, in as infantry, we were mech infantry over there, and it's kind of the same thing. Like, we're relying on these Bradley crews to make sure that, like, when we're on the ground, that they got us covered, that we got them covered. It's a whole thing. And back
Yeah.
in 04, it was a lot of that stuff. So I think we can kind of relate in a way.
Yeah.
Mainly because we were together for so long. We were together, normally in the active duty UETS every 2 years, maybe three. We were together almost 4 years solid because of stop loss and stop movements. So we knew each other like the back of each other's hand, literally.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I know everything about him. He knows everything about me. So we had a fucking blast when we got deployed.
Oh yeah,
I,
no. Yeah, it was. I remember on the bus ride to when we went to catch the plane to fly out. It's like, I don't remember being like afraid or anything, because I wasn't with a bunch of people that I didn't know. Like, I knew all these dudes. We had some new guys in the unit, but like,
Mhm.
nothing crazy. But like, so there is this level of comfort of being like, I know these dudes. I know how they train and I know how they work, and I feel comfortable with that, and it's okay. And it was pretty good.
Yeah, especially if you've deployed, a couple times, and you're like, this guy's got my back. And I think that's the thing a lot of people don't notice, because when they go to get out and on the civilian world, nobody's really got your back. And
Yeah.
it's kind of depressing. I think that's where a lot of I'll find out here shortly, but I think that's where a lot of the we call it the spicy sadness. You get out and you're like, dude, what have I done? And everybody out here is kind of not a very good person.
That is absolutely the truth. And it is kind of the spicy sadness, because that's what he and I did. So we did our 4 years on active duty. We got out right after we went to Iraq. 90 days later, we ETS. And then we both ended up coming into the reserves a short time later. But it is a really interesting transition, especially back in 05 when, GWAT veterans were not much of a thing. And, we had the like you said, the Gulf War veterans who, they had a very short time frame to do things. And so the last actual veterans who had sustained combat were Vietnam. And, I was fortunate to have had an uncle of mine who was a Vietnam veteran. And so he kind of helped guide me a little bit, but like, it was still kind of an interesting transition. And when we talk to people now who are about to retire or are coming, whatever, or have retired after 20 plus years in the service, and making that transition from military person to now I got to go be a civilian person, it is a really interesting transition. A lot of people tend to be kind of scared of it, shaken up by it, not sure what to do next, because they have lived this very specific lifestyle for so long, and it's pretty much all they know as an adult. And
Mhm.
now they have to go operate as a civilian and start using HR terminology. And you can't just tell somebody to shut the fuck up. You can't, you have to be a little bit more polite.
Still
But
say it, you just have to say it in
I
the
think
right way.
you have to lie more often.
Yeah.
yeah, it's an interesting world for sure. um and people keep asking me, because I'm retiring this year, and people are like, hey, so what are you going to do after the army? I'm like, well, I'm in the reserve, so like I'm a civilian 98% of the time.
Which
um
fine.
yeah, it's really not that bad, but it's still, you still think about like, well, now I'm not going to have to put on a uniform and go do these things. I'm not going to be able to volunteer to go to Fort Leonard Wood to train troops, whatever. And And so there is a little bit of that, like, I'm not going to have that, but it's definitely not the same thing as an active duty person transitioning to, the civilian world. It's two different things.
And
Apples and oranges.
the other thing is, I think a lot of guys take for granted, I'm getting all this freedom. Well, the on the active duty side, I use the terminology. It's not a job; it's a profession, and a profession comes with certain things, and one of those is some respect from society, And so suddenly you're out, and all your good friends are somewhere else, and nobody cares as much. When you tell somebody, hey, I'm specialist so and so, 82nd Airborne, that comes with some awe and some respect. And then you're like, hey, I'm Doug, Army veteran. They're like, yeah, cool, yeah, get over there. That's the shit pile. Start shoveling.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
on the clock.
It's a thing. Yeah. So like whatever, all your accolades in the service, we walk around in the Army, we have all of our stuff, all of our uniform. And I can look at somebody and be like, oh, dang. So you got a CIB. So you've seen combat. You got an EIB. So you know what's to work for stuff. You jumped out of an airplane. So you know how to fall.
Here, respect that I know to give you. You're like, oh,
exactly.
cool, thanks.
Yeah, exactly. But in the civilian world, it's a nice polo you've got on there. It's a different world for sure.
That's the thing. When it comes down to that, you just have to set yourself up to be ready to maybe slide into something that's similar to military. I went into the LAPD after I got out, and it was an easy transition. They thought it was hard, but nah, come on, easy time in the LAPD. And it was just like being in the Army all over again. A bunch of Army guys, Marines, big good mix of everyone, a good team, and man, as long as you got a plan, you'd be all right.
Yeah.
That's the plan.
Mm-hmm.
I hate when guys are getting out and I'm like, what's your plan? Like, well, I'm gonna get out and then I'll see what happens. I'm like, oh, sweet Jesus.
No.
All right.
Okay.
You have Wednesday off today. I need you to come up with a plan. You're gonna do what?
So with that being said, what is your plan?
So that's why I'm still slow rolling here. I am I'm gonna find something, right? I think I'm gonna strike a balance between still kind of assisting the Army with kind of their image, the recruiting and retention things, and my current profession as a Green Beret is force innovation. So I communicate what we need to industry, and I also communicate what industry can actually build down to the operator. And it's so we don't ask for things that aren't at the cutting edge. Ask for something too easy, but also don't ask for a lightsaber because no matter how much money I give them, they can't build you one. So I'll probably get in with a defense contractor of some sort. Just where I haven't figured out yet.
Right. And one thing I've always kind of wondered, and I think Tyree's kind of wondered the same, and you may have wondered the same in the past too, prior to December 16th, 2021. But what is life for a Medal of Honor recipient after receiving the Medal of Honor, especially while in the service still?
So I think for me that they learned the Army had kind of learned about being over controlling because a lot of the early recipients all got out, and not because they could or they just felt so uncomfortable in the Army they left. So for me, I deployed like immediately following my ceremony, and nothing really changed.
Nice.
And everybody that I served with on that team, they all knew the story. So for them, like, oh, you finally got the medal, cool. So there wasn't any real big adjustment. So that being said, I have noticed people that are showing up post Medal of Honor treat me much differently than people I've served with in the past. So and, when I walk into a room now, I can kind of stick everybody to the wall, which is uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, especially for your profession.
I'm not a general officer. I'm a E8. I've spent my entire career on teams. You know, I've never served at a higher level than an ODA. So for me, it's like super off-putting because I'm one of the guys.
Yeah. That's what I was gonna ask. Like now you have this and everyone's gonna treat you different. Everybody. It
Yeah.
no matter what, it's
And,
just how it
and
is.
they
But
ask, you know, it's funny to me because people ask me the craziest damn questions. You know, I got the Medal of Honor for valor. Uh, I didn't I didn't get special classes with Plato. I'm not a philosopher or a theoretical physicist. So people ask me these crazy questions, and like, you know, I can talk about tactics, and I can talk about um, tactical leadership, and that's about it. I'm an expert in those things.
Well, and I think when we for we common folk, right? For everybody outside of it who's in the military or who knows what the Medal of Honor is and what it represents, and what it takes to become a recipient of it, you know, it's up there, right? It's on a pedestal, and we look at it as like, holy shit, you know. And so then, you know, and we look at history, historically, a lot of them are awarded posthumously, and so to be like, oh my god, this guy's getting, and he's alive, he's around, he survived the things that he did. And so there comes with that this like level of like, you know, godlike persona that is portrayed or, you know, put on these people. But at the end of the day, and what it sounds like, from what you're saying, uh you're an NCO and you work in a profession where what you did was what you were supposed to do. Is that
Right.
kind of how you feel about it?
I mean, yeah.
I mean, in
I
that
think
situation, like, what else were you supposed to do? You know what I mean?
so. I remember they were during the investigation for the Medal of Honor. They were of particular interest was whether I had the ability to escape, because that's a big deal, right?
Huh.
Because if you're trapped in a corner and you fight to the death, well, I mean, you were trapped in a corner. It takes something from it. And to me, he was like, "Well, did you have the ability to flee?" And I was like, "Well, no." He's like, "Why not?" I was like, "Well, because I would have had to jump over all my wounded friends, and that would have been, you know, that's impossible. Like,
Yeah.
I would have to run past all my buddies that were not able to flee. So, no, I did not." He's like, "I mean, but you did have the ability to." Like, I guess if I wanted to be a social pariah, and it makes Christmas parties really awkward when everybody that's there, you left their fathers to die on the battlefield. But yeah, technically, I guess I could have run away.
mhm.
That's yeah.
It looks like I'm gonna have to Tarantino this thing. So let's back it up again. Since we were talking about it, go through that day for us, for anyone who isn't familiar.
Okay, so Polish Fob, we had a special forces camp inside of it, um, which is key because you'll be wondering, you know, why we weren't more involved in the security, and it's because we weren't involved in the security at all. And anyway, they'd been attacking our camp almost daily with indirect fire for about 2 or 3 weeks, and I thought it was just harassment fire to cause, you know, a shell lands on the camp, all the sirens go off, and you have to go sit in a bunker until the EOD guys find it and tell you that the bomb has went off, and then we're like, yeah, no shit. The first clue was the explosion. um, but what they were doing was um, mapping out the responses, mapping out where everybody sought cover, and building a shot card for their guns, so that they could accurately engage areas of the camp that they wanted to. So for me, that morning, we're sitting there in the building I was in, just got rocked by a huge explosion. I was in the med shed with our company medic, and you know, I thought that that artillery round had landed on our building, and you know, I'm climbing up off the floor, and you know, asking. I was asking him, "Hey, are you okay?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm good." And So I'm going to go walk outside and tell everybody not to worry about us. And I walk outside, to tell everybody not to come over here with their hair on fire because we're both fine. But when I walk outside, what was like a super clear, pretty Afghan day is now there's this dusty fog hanging over the entire camp, and every person is coming out of their building thinking that their building's the one that's been hit. And I'm slowly kind of looking around trying to figure out what exactly has occurred here, and I see this mushroom cloud kind of dominating the sky of the camp, and that's because a 35 to 5,000 pound vehicle-borne explosive device had been detonated, and which is not typical.
Yeah, that's huge.
of anybody's career. But so as I'm looking at it, I start hearing small arms and indirect fire, and it picks up, and it's getting louder and louder, and that's what kind of my cue that, like, hey, this was going to be a different kind of day. And I jump in all my stuff, throw all my gear on, and another buddy of mine, Nate Abkemeyer, he comes running up, and we hop in our we had a little Toyota pickup truck, and we're driving out. We pick up another buddy of mine, the intelligence sergeant from my ODA, Drew Busick, load him up in the back seat, and start with the camp, and head down to where this dust cloud is. And as we get down there, had two other operators pull past on a 4-wheeler, and they're giving us the thumbs up, pointing down to the where this bomb's detonated, and we're like, yeah, we're going there too. Let's push. And as we get down there, I started slowing the truck down because I had a sniper rifle at the time, so I wanted to climb up on this wall and kind of dominate the terrain over this airfield, and watch the breach, because we're kind of figuring out that they breached the wall for a purpose. And I didn't realize how prepared they were, because I'm thinking we got there pretty quick, but they had really probably sprinted toward that bomb as it was detonating, and the assault force had already got through the breach before we got down there. But as Matt Horde and Chief Colbert pull up on this 4-wheeler, they both just get hit with small arms fire, and kind of a lot of it. And we have a drill for that, so we can see them getting hit and taking fire. So we're going to pull our truck in between them and the fire. At this point, I can't see where they're getting shot at, or where they're getting shot from. And so I kick my door open and start prepping to pull my rifle out. And as we pull forward, I just see Afghan soldiers all over the place. And I'm like, typical, these damn Afghans have run off again. I'm going to get them corralled up and put them in the fight. But thank God they're here, because I got something to work with. But as we pull into with pretty much like a little school circle of Afghan soldiers, they identified themselves as not Afghan soldiers by shooting at us. And they'd had a couple attacks on camps, and they kept trying different things, dressing up like the Taliban will get you shot at. They tried to dress up like American soldiers, but we have a pretty strict uniform code, so everybody picked up on it immediately that you're not supposed to wear sneakers and wrong colored t-shirts. Mm-hmm. So that didn't work. So they said, I can look like an Afghan army soldier. Let's try that. And it worked. We parked right in the middle of these a-holes. But they started shooting us up. I pushed my rifle out, fired one round at the nearest guy, and my rifle jammed. Which, of course it did, because it never jammed before, it never jammed after, but that day it jammed. And that kind of left me in a pickle, because I'm sitting in that truck seat with the door kicked open, facing probably 7-8 guys all shooting into the truck. And I only had really one thought was by Nate and Drew enough time to figure something else out. So I transitioned my pistol and I just assaulted into what was their little line of troops that they had about 10 or 15 meters from the truck. And you know, I started just working my way across these guys, engaging with my pistol. And you know, was fairly competent pistol shot, so I started getting hits and putting guys down. And for whatever reason, they shot everybody except for me.
Jeez.
So yeah, the Nate got shot. Drew was sitting in the back. You know, he's getting shot, and he's still pretty salty about it because all the bullets that hit him came through my door, somehow missed me and then hit him. And then obviously Chief Colbert and Matt Horde were hit several times riding up on that four-wheeler. But anyway, I got right in the middle of these guys. My pistol was mostly empty, and I'm kind of in shock because, you know, the nearest guy was probably 7 meters, and I was, you know, coming right down the axis of his rifle. And we actually got the rifle afterwards, and I put 2 rounds, one in the crown of his muzzle and one on the front sight post of his AK.
Nice.
Yeah. And then some, you know, I mean, somehow he was able to hit Drew behind me. But so my rifle's jammed. My pistol is it's probably got 2 or 3 rounds in it, you know, and I'm trying to figure out what to do next. So I pulled out a hand grenade and just kind of threw it up in the air in the middle of us. And because I figured, you know, nobody wants to stand next to a hand grenade, which is especially true if you're wearing a suicide vest. It got them all, they got super excited about it. Which worked, you know, that everybody took off running, and I got my rifle back up, and I'm sitting there trying to figure out what to do next. And I hear that snap thump of rounds coming past me, and there's AK fire hitting the wall behind me. And I look out to my left and rear, and there's a guy, you know, Taliban fighter in a sling supported prone position, just driving them in. And bad zero, or just, you know, a little rattled out there on the battlefield, but he threw a pretty nice little group, probably a, you know, 5-inch group of rounds on the wall, just about 3 to 4 inches below the nape of my neck. And you know, I didn't get a hit. So I held center on I still remember seeing the notch of his neck. I just held center on him right there because my rifle was zeroed at 100 meters, and he's exactly at 100 meters because it's where we do our sprints in the morning between the flight line and this wall. And pulled the trigger, and like he vaporized from this plane of existence, which you know, was shocking also. And I was like, what the hell just happened? You know, I was looking around. I thought maybe a Polish tank had come in and hit him with the main gun.
Oh man.
What rifle did you have?
I had a Scar heavy, a Mark 20 though. It's in the split the difference between an actual sniper rifle and the Mark 17 Scar. Which, you know, comes into play later because I had like a 15 power scope on it, perfect for anywhere else in Afghanistan except for on the fob in a close in fight.
Of course.
How much time is actually going on from the initial explosion until the point you're explaining now?
I don't know, probably like 70, 80 seconds, something like that, you know.
Jesus.
Holy shit.
Because yeah, so it's the bomb's gone off, you know, we got in a truck and we've driven, you know, maybe 600 meters. So not a lot. And I remember, you know, telling this, you know, I have the story, you know, and I remember kind of recounting it. I thought it was like a 45-minute gunfight. maybe an hour, because I just remember being exhausted afterwards. And then we start watching the video because there was a raid camera kind of panning back and forth on auto throughout the entire battle, and everything's happening like I said it happened, except for it's happening on fast forward. And so from when the bomb detonated until we came back to the camp, I think was 11 to 12 minutes.
Wow.
And then for the actual shooting part of the gunfight, I think it was like 6 to 7 minutes of just high intensity gunfighting, and then it was over. But it seemed like forever.
Do you find that when you talk to folks who have never deployed or have never been seen combat, or civilians, that the expectation is kind of the same? That like something like that would be a long drawn out thing and not happen so like immediate?
No, actually, I think for most people, this is exactly what they imagine, because the movie, you have your love scene, and the funny guy gets killed, and then you have a super epic gunfight, and then the movie's over. So as far as like Hollywood standard, it's right, it's perfect. That have actually been in combat, or like trying to break the story down, it doesn't make sense. Typically getting that last 100 meters, getting people to close that 100-meter gap and actually mix it up with a close-in fight, it's difficult because people just don't like it.
Mm-hmm.
Even professional soldiers, they hate actually getting close enough to the enemy where you can see them and hear them when they're hurt. It's unsettling.
Yeah, that would be most of our engagements. I think were at a pretty good distance, most because we were mechanized, but there were a handful of times where it was, not at a long distance. But that's, at least for us, I think we still had that expectation that it was going to be that way. And I think if you find yourself in a combat MOS or in combat, and you have this expectation that it's not, that it couldn't become close quarters, then I think you're setting yourself up for failure, kind of.
Definitely.
I think if you're going to be in those situations, like if you're going to combat, just be open to all possibilities.
And it's what I found, there's an emotional hurdle, and it kind of starts around 200 to 300 meters, because then both sides, that's not that difficult a shot to make. So if you stand up, you could get hit, and you're starting to see the enemy, and closing that distance is difficult. And that's where I've driven up on it probably 1,000 times. Troops in contact, and you go see what they're doing, and they're trying to suppress better. We're going to flank them. We're waiting on air already, because it's even if it's like 10 guys in a tree line, and you got a whole infantry company, getting everybody up and moving to close that close in fight is always difficult.
You think? I mean, there's obviously some psychology at play there, right? Have you ever read On Combat or On Killing by?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's the first time because I was trying to figure out what I was seeing on the battlefield, because people just they turn, everybody kind of flinches when it finally comes down to put steel on steel. The majority of the population is just incredibly uncomfortable with it.
Right. Yeah, I on Combat helped me a lot in that post active duty, post wartime transition. When I read it, I was like, holy shit, like that's what's going on. And then reading On Killing, and they break down like the psychology behind teaching one human to kill another human the way that we do in the military, and just the statistics behind it, and all the research that was it General SLA Marshall did back in World War II time frame. Really good.
What's funny about that I think's so interesting is I can't remember his name right now. He's an ancient philosopher, and he's the one that, of the 100 men,
Yeah.
A shouldn't even be here. it's still true that is like he really kind of defined what the battlefield looks like psychologically, even back then.
Yeah, no, I agree. And you know, what's funny is I think we've gotten better with our training, right? With how we train people to perform these functions in combat. In most cases, in some cases, the army, at least the army anyway, has gotten kind of away from. But that's a whole different story. But that mentality or that quote still kind of rings true. So like even with all this training and understanding of what's happening on a psychological level and how we can create these methodologies to kind of bypass that, it's still kind of true. Like you still have that one guy who is like,
yeah, I mean, that's the what was it, the if he's just not built for it, it doesn't matter how much training you give him, he just can't kill.
Mhm.
Unless it's by accident, you know. And I think that's where like make him an artillery guy or something. And I, but it's, you know, I think all the training we do is because you can't identify that person. I don't think through testing. The test is combat when you finally put him there, and can he act? I think is the big test. And so you have to train everybody to a high level, and then those people, you know, just outperform their peers on the battlefield, and then they outperform the enemy on the battlefield. And then you know, and it's a sliding scale, right? You know, I don't think it's a hard line. There's varying levels of performance, and units get better. I mean, I've seen green units, and then you know 4 or 5 months later, you see how they react under fire. They start getting better. But I really, you know, there's just a huge portion of the population that just really can't kill somebody until it's too late. Because you know everybody wants to kill to protect their own life or something, and by the time you've given the enemy a chance to um, act on that, you've kind of missed your chance to have that advantage.
right.
And I think that's also a lot of things. A lot of times people have really bad PTSD. It's because they weren't as aggressive as they should have been on the battlefield. You know, trying to hope for the best in their fellow human, and then somebody gets killed, and you can't take that back.
Right. Yeah, I can see that. So it's kind of so not necessarily PTSD from the experience, but from the regret of what you could have done better in the experience.
So the worst PTSD that I've seen is the guys that have the guilt of knowing in their heart that they weren't as aggressive on the battlefield as they could have been, or as professional on the battlefield as they could have been, and then somebody they cared about got killed. Because you know, even if I can tell you that, you know, don't feel that way, it's not true, but you can't speak to that person because in his heart he feels that way. And that's, to me, that's the people that carry the heaviest burden.
Right.
Um, and there's nothing I can say to ever make it right, you know.
Well, I think in that case, there's nothing anybody can say, right? Because it's how you feel in your heart. I mean, like how can somebody outside of you say, "No, man, you gave your 100%," when you probably could have given a little bit more, you know.
Yeah.
So
And it's the well, especially, you know, like, oh, I didn't want to shoot him because his back was to me. I'm like, okay.
yeah,
And he's like, I wonder if that's the guy that killed my best friend. Like,
Exactly.
I don't know. We'll never find out, probably.
right, yeah. No way to actually know. And going back to that day though, so the fight didn't stop there though, right? Like when you popped that guy with
No.
the
So
scar.
um, you know, I you know, detonated him, and I started figuring out that I detonated a suicide vest, you know, and for me, I was like super excited because every sniper wants to uh, shoot a guy in the S vest and detonate his vest. You know, it's on your to do list. So I was pumped, and I was actually kind of let down because I was like, dude, did you guys see that? Is that gold regulation or what? And I'm like, I'm out here by myself though. Nobody's here to see it.
Mm.
Oh god,
Uh,
the humor that we find in these situations though, it's hilarious. It's
yeah,
awesome.
and but so I could still hear everybody, you know, yelling for help behind me. hollering for support, hollering for medics, and um, I'm at this little corner, so I don't want to go back to where they're at because then anybody can just walk around this corner and be right on top of us. So I decided to go after the guys I saw run off, and stay engaged. So at least have a fight, not on top of my friends, and then if they maneuver on the camp, they won't be able to do it effectively because I'll be right there behind them, kind of degrading their ability to do that. So I traipse off down this little lane made out of a HESCO wall and Sealand containers. And I get about halfway down to the next little intersection, and they must have been watching me, seen me coming, because I get there and all hell breaks loose. Everybody starts hanging muzzles and taking me under fire. And I'm shooting back as best I can, and my rifle runs dry. And I knew I was kind of down to like my last bullet in my pistol, so I didn't figure the transitioning again was going to win it. So I just start reloading my SCAR, and as soon as I pull the muzzle up and dump the magazine, the nearest fighter to me sprints from cover. He's at the corner of like the Sealand container. I just remember real clear. He threw his rifle into his sling, so it kind of like swings behind him, and he just started sprinting at me, which I figured wasn't good. And but anyway, I got my rifle reloaded. Just kind of pressed it out in front of me and just hammered down on him and detonated his vest. Which
you got two in one day.
Emotionally, it felt like he was hanging on the end of my muzzle, but he was probably I don't know. He was probably 10 or 12 meters from me.
God, that's so close.
Doesn't even matter. Shit.
And it do me a whole hell lot of good because his vest detonated and it blew me into that HESCO wall pretty hard. And it hurt.
I bet. And for folks listening that are watching that don't know the metric system, I mean, that's 30 feet. They're about 30 to 35 feet. That's close.
Yeah. Watching a guy pop like a fucking watermelon. So you get thrown back. Was there what happened next? I'm sitting here on the edge of my seat. Was it just right back into the fight, or okay?
So
back together again, or what the fuck was?
So I was kind of laying there against the wall, kind of shaking that off, and I was kind of TKO'd, so I was kind of looking around, trying to figure out what I was looking at, and I started hearing rifle fire, and I remember that that real heavy, it's like real heavy gravel they put all the fobs. Yeah. So I was laying in some of that, and the rocks were like exploding, and it's all this rocks and shit are hitting me in the face, and I look up and another fighter has come over and he's shooting at my face, but he's looking over the top of his rifle, so all of his rounds are landing 14, 15 inches low, and it's hitting the gravel in front of my face instead. And anyway, I didn't figure that was going to work, so I pulled my rifle up and just started hammering again, and folded him up in just a little heap right there in the road. Kind of fought to my feet, started shooting at his friends, and then my rifle ran dry again. Anyway, given my past experience, I decided to reload somewhere else. So I dumped my magazine and ran back down to the corner. I got got my gun up about the time I hit the corner, and I crashed right into Drew, who's been locked in the back seat of this Toyota the whole time. Like just a super freak accident. A round has come through the A-pillar and then went down, and it hit the child safety locks that are on the side of the Toyota. Because when I stepped out of the truck, Drew tried to follow me, and he's in there locked in the back of the truck.
Wow.
But anyway,
special forces guy taken out of the fight by the child locks.
yeah,
It's terrible.
Yeah, it's super weird. That was on our to-do list. Hey, disable child safety locks from now on when we get these trucks.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's just a little red tab that's in the door. You can only get to it when it's open.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, I don't think that would ever happen again, but it happened once. So now we're cautious about it.
It's in the SOP.
Yeah. But anyway, Drew shows up, and I'm like, Drew, I know right where they're at. Let's go get them. And he's like, all right, let's do this. And so we pop back out and head back down to where they were at. Doing, Drew's on the far left of this little lane. I'm on the far right, doing cross coverage, and we get most of the way down there, and Drew's about to like step over this last guy I shot. So his vest didn't detonate, but he's sitting there smoldering. And I yelled at Drew. I was like, hey, stay away from the bodies. They got suicide vests on, which, holds him up, and he looks over and he's like, what? And I was like, they all have suicide vests. Stay away from them. And as we're having this discussion, this guy's vest goes low order and just starts burning like a huge blowtorch, which causes Drew. He runs over, and he's with me now on the far right, and we're behind this generator junction panel. And this guy's vest is burning. They started shooting at us again. So Drew and I are fighting back, and then they just start pelting us with hand grenades. I guess everybody had like 10 or 15 hand grenades on them of the fighters that are left, and they're all just whipping them at us 2 at a time. But they're throwing them so hard that it's hitting the wall and then bouncing back in front of the lane in front of us, or it's hitting the generator panel and bouncing back and detonating. So it's not super effective, but it'll get your attention because it's still a grenade detonating, like 7 meters in front of you.
Yeah.
Which is uncomfortable. And I just remembered every time I try to, I had a little red dot 45 offset, and every time I try to line it up on a target, something would blow up or catch on fire. And I just remember just shooting, but never really aiming at anything. Mostly just out of frustration of trying to, participate at this point. And as I'm kind of fighting through this, I get hit in the throat with a big chunk of something. And I look down, and there's a hand grenade, and it's trapped in between my admin pouch and this wall, or this generator panel. And figured that wasn't good.
No.
But anyway, I started raking at it aggressively, which is as funny as the old parachute had a procedure on it where you would kind of rake down to get it to go out. It's like a trainingism. The only mechanism that I had in my head was parachute shit. So as soon as I see this grenade, I just started like wiping at it like crazy to get it away from me. And which I did. It flicked off in front of us and detonated where the others were, and then something hit me in the back of the knee and kind of broke the lock on my leg, and I looked down, and there's a grenade in between Drew and I, and it had hit the wall and ricocheted in and hit me in the back of the leg, which got me and Drew pretty excited. So we both started trying to get it out from behind there with us, which is another instead of dramatic rock music, our whole gunfight had Benny Hill music playing.
That's funny.
Anyway, we get that thing booted out of there, and Drew grabs me and he yanked me with him. He said, "We gotta get out of here. They're gonna kill us." And we made it about 2 steps from behind that generator panel, and we both get blown down on top of him. He's squirming under me, fighting to get to his feet, and I'm trying to get up while pushing him down. And we get back to our feet, and we run around that corner again, and catching our breath. Ooh, wow. And at that point, Chief Colbert, Mark Colbert, comes walking up, and he's like, "What the hell are you two doing?" And we turn around and we're like, "Chief, we know right where they're at. Let's go get them." And he's like, "Okay." And he's limping up because he was on that 4-wheeler that first pulled in, and he got shot pretty good. But they shot him right through the butt cheeks. So I always make fun of him. He's got 5 assholes now, 1 from God and 4 from the Taliban.
Oh my God.
And so anyway, we stack up. We had our 1 Navy SEAL, Lieutenant Turnip Seed. He was on the camp for the change of command that we were having that day. And we're getting ready to push back down, and I'm trying to reload. I'm like, I'm gonna top this gun off, and I can't find a magazine. And I look down, it's because I have none. My whole rack is empty at this point. So I pull my mag out, and I've got 1 round on the feed lips. And I was like, that's not good. And I have a scar shooting 308, and everybody else has an M4, so nobody's got any ammo to give me. So I tell Chief, I'm like, "Hey, you have to take point. I can't." And he's like, "Why can't you take point?" And I was like, "Because I only got 1 bullet." It's like, "You take point, but don't worry, I'll cover you." And he's like, "Yeah, thanks."
Yeah.
So Chief, he slides past me and starts limping down his point. And as we're turning the corner to leave, a Polish lieutenant and then a sergeant from the 10th Mountain, Mike Ollis, came running up, and he was like, "Can I come with you?" And we're like, "Yeah, if you want to. It's pretty bad down there though, but come on." And so they ease in there behind us. We get most of the way to that generator panel again, and not that it's peaceful, because the rest of the camp is still catching hell, but nobody's shooting at us or throwing hand grenades at us from like 10 feet away. And Chief Colbert's he's looking, and there's piles, there's like body parts just all over the place, just like a big mess. And he said, "I think you guys got them all." And right as he says it, this kid sits up out of a pile of arms and legs, bounce passes 2 hand grenades at us, and then detonates his vest. And which causes everybody to go, scurry off to different places. And I remember, grenade came, and it was laying there, and for whatever reason, I just wasn't that concerned about it, because I don't, I already wrote out like 15 of them, and I was like, yeah, the best thing is just to sit tight. These don't hurt you. I remember thinking that really clearly in my head. But I remember I was like, oh shit, I didn't put iPro on. I better not look at it. So I just turned my head toward the HESCO wall. And it detonated. It hurt, but I didn't get wounded. So I guess I was right. I wouldn't teach that as a preferred method.
No. The grenade, despite that day, grenades do hurt. From what I hear,
they hurt, but it's not that big a deal.
Yeah.
Well, which afterwards, Drew was wiping me down for injuries, and he was just furious that I wasn't wounded that badly. He was really upset about it, because he caught hell in the back of the truck. Every time a grenade detonated, he caught a piece of it. So I think Drew's got a piece of grenade frag about every 6 to 8 inches for like his entire body.
Good Lord.
So he was really put out that I didn't get wounded. But anyway, so that grenade detonated, and everybody's kind of scattered at this point, and start hearing rifle fire to my rear again. And one of these fighters has run all the way around this little block we're on and attack the guys in the rear, which is Mike Ollis and this Polish lieutenant, Jerpika. And I fire my last 2 rounds at him, and Drew is on the other side of this, hitting him with the MP5. And whether we detonated his vest or he got hit and detonated it, don't know. But his vest detonated, and he was probably a foot from Mike Ollis, and just launched Mike most of the distance to me. And at that point, my pistol's completely empty, my rifle's empty. I actually had my pocket knife out, and I was kind of jumping around with my pocket knife out. And then I figured out I might be immune to grenades, but probably I don't need a knife fight people in suicide vests. So I put my knife up and ran over and grabbed Mike Ollis and drug him into another compound where I could kind of treat him.
How bad was his injuries at that point? I mean, he just
it was bad. I received a ton of training, and I treated a lot of casualties in combat. So I went right after him, and it took me a minute, as I was getting after him, and I was like, wait, I don't need to do any of this. Like we're on base. Like I can see the surgical tent from here. So I finished up with his tourniquets, and then we got him in a little Suzuki Mule and got him to the surgical unit there out in Ghazni. Probably like less than 2 minutes after he got injured.
Yeah,
but if you know the story, unfortunately, like he was killed. He succumbed to his injuries.
Yeah, that's wild. That's I'm just trying to like, when you can put yourself there if you've experienced combat before. So I'm trying to like imagine all this as you're saying it, and it's just I mean, there you are with the pocket knife in your hand, and you're like, wait a second, this is not going to be effective. Like I might stab somebody in the throat, but they're gonna blow up.
Yeah.
Half the time you're getting beamed by grenades, like fucking Nolan Ryan out here.
Yeah.
Hey man, I can't.
And it was, I do a tactical talk on why I feel I was successful. There are things I did that led to my success. But the main one, like if that grenade, instead of hitting me down here, if it just beamed me in the face, that probably would have been the end. If at any time, if they'd have hit me anywhere, if they did just winged me in the leg or something, totally would have changed that battle. But they didn't.
Yeah, no, and with everything blowing up and all of the rounds being fired and all of the shit that's going on, this mass chaos, the fact that you didn't catch any of that. I mean, like it sounds like the worst of it was getting blasted into the HESCO barrier.
I mean, that's what hurt the most.
Yeah.
Actually, where is it? I got it around here. So, but anyway, at the end of the battle, Drew was like, "Are you hit?" And I was like, "I don't think so." And because I had blood all over me, but it was all their blood. And then he was messing with my arm, and I was like, "Okay, well, that kind of hurts." And I had not this one, but I had just the brass from an AK round sticking out of my arm.
What?
And the primer wasn't dented. So, like, I guess when somebody blew their vest, it ripped their magazine apart, pulled the bullet and the powder out, and it went flipping through the air and stuck in my arm. But I pulled it out myself with my Gerber, and it left. It was the hardest thing was it had created like suction on my tissue, and so I was like pulling on it, and it was like it wouldn't. It was like a tentacle. But I pulled it off, and it just left a little ring in my skin, and now like you can't even see it unless I get a sunburn, and there's still like a little AK ring on my arm. But that was it.
That's you might be the first person in history to be shot by the shell, the brass.
By the brass, yeah. But I did strain my back pretty badly. So I was having back spasms that night, and they gave me a bunch of muscle relaxers. I forget what do sad housewives take all the time.
Oh my god, Valium. I don't know.
Valium. Yeah, they gave me a bunch of Valium.
And whatever you want after all that.
Yeah. So I went that night. The whole camp stayed at 100% security. Um, but I went to bed because I was on Valium, and I just think it's a funny part of the story because so Drew and Chief had to man a tower all night. That's the walking wounded got tower
Detail.
guard. Yeah. So Chief's shot through the butt. Drew's shot everywhere, so they couldn't sit down because it hurt too bad. So they stood up, leaning over this sandbag machine gun emplacement, and they pulled a guard shift all night long. And they're like, "Hey, where's Earl at?" And I'm like, "Oh, he's asleep. He's wounded." Like, I'm wounded. Why the hell? Why am I out here? So I got up the next morning. I was pretty sore, and everybody was still at 100% security. And I made coffee, and I was like, "What have you guys been doing?"
You can see you waking up with the birds chirping, yawning, stretching.
Yeah, yesterday was rough, and they were like, "Yeah, yesterday never ended for us. We were on guard all night long."
So I have to ask, all the chaos, the hurricane of hell going on around you, what was it like to line up with those guys that you trained with in the middle of this for even that little bit of time?
Oh man, so that was when we went back through and we made that turn, and I'm following Chief, and he's limping, and he's got blood all run down the back of his legs, and Drew's been hit 100 times, and he's leading that other stack up the front, and I just knew we were gonna we're gonna win. I just remember being like just super proud, and like I don't know if pride's the right word. I was just so happy to be part of that, and I just knew we were going to go in there and just kick ass, and it just just being in an aggressive unit that's coming for you, like that just felt cool, man.
Man, I can't imagine. Like, we've been in firefights, and it's nice to have our guys behind us, but something like that and that fucking super spicy all the way to 12 situation. I, I I commend you guys for all that, man. That's incredible. I'm sitting here, like Kevin said, visualizing everything in slow motion with music in the background because that's how cool shit happens. But that really wasn't cool, man. That was hell that you guys are going through. You are wounded by shrapnel from this guy. It could have been bone matter. It could have been anything that you're stuck. It's the fact that you guys were able to get together and fight through it in such a short period of time too. Because again, the way you're describing it, in my head, I'm running it. It makes it feel like it was an hour and some change, but no, this was
Like
what's now?
Yeah, just like 6 minutes from start to finish.
I watched in an interview that you had done. I don't remember on what it was exactly, but one thing that you said and it kind of stood out to me, and I really appreciate this about you because you said I know countless stories from all my peers, and to be able to have that medal for all those guys is what makes me most proud. So like you've received the Medal of Honor, but like all of these dudes who have done all these amazing things, and you're recognizing that medal and you being the recipient of it for all of those people. That's badass, man. That's humble. That's humble.
I think that's my thing, especially being a Green Beret. Most of the time when we go to combat, we lead a indigenous force. So there's guys that do amazing things on the battlefield. But one thing that we have a requirement with the Medal of Honor is it has to be without a doubt. It has to have happened, or we're not going to do it. So, typically a Green Beret, there's just no witnesses that are credible enough to warrant the Medal of Honor. That doesn't mean that they're not out there, meeting the merit and the metrics for it. And so I know countless stories that if it had been an American unit, like that guy would have got a top 3 Valor Award. It wasn't there. And that's something like that's going to keep you humble.
Yeah. Well, so the Medal of Honor criteria, right? Recipients must distinguish themselves conspicuously by gallantry and intrepidity, risking a loss of life above and beyond the call of duty. I mean, that's practically it. And then there's like, it has to be against an enemy force, et cetera, and so on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you need a overwhelming amount of credible evidence.
Right.
And just by the very nature of a battlefield, it's I think that's probably one of the biggest discriminators for whether a guy gets the Medal of Honor is if you can put it down and say this exactly happened this way.
Yeah. And now, so you're one of 3,530 recipients of the medal, which is a really small number. And we know, right? If you've served and if you've served in combat, you've seen guys and gals do incredible things in the heat of the moment. So, so it's definitely a big fucking deal, right? But now your name is up there with all of these Roy Benavidez and Adi Murphy, Salvatore Giunta, and, all these guys who did incredible things, and that's got to be also kind of like a humbling feeling as well too. Like, man, like, do you ever have the thought though? Do I deserve to be a part of this?
Yeah, I mean, what do they call that? Imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
Yeah. So because for me, I was always a Medal of Honor groupie, if you will. I had the book and I knew all the narratives, even as a kid. So for me, Audie Murphy is like the gold standard, right?
Yeah.
And they're like, "Hey, you're being nominated for the Medal of Honor." I was like, "Oh, okay." I always thought it was like this emotional knee-jerk reaction that would kind of die off. Because for me, Audie Murphy was the if you didn't kill off 100 Germans, it wasn't going to happen.
The standard felt different.
Yeah. So yeah, I think there's always that, and then I think the first time I really it kind of settled in was I went to the Medal of Honor convention, and there's all the living recipients are in there, and I was just fanboying it, man. I was like, I was like pointing to my wife. I was like, "Do you know who that is? Do you know who that is?" And just geeking out, and then they start coming over, and they're like, glad handing me and slapping me and saying, how impressed they are to meet me and know my story. And I was like,
That's incredible.
like,
That's
hey, Drew Dix thinks I'm cool.
that's nuts. Like that's one of the questions I wanted to ask is when you're ever around other recipients, like and you telling these stories, is there ever anything like, oh, I mean, that's you guys are a very specific group. Okay. So me and Kevin, we're in a group where we can joke around with each other. Is there like joking with recipients?
I mean, some of them they're like any group of veterans, to be honest with you. So you got me. I thought my gunfight was pretty fun until until the run out of ammo part. But not every recipient nor veteran enjoyed their time. And for a lot of them, for me, I pull my medal out and I remember, charging in with my buddies and then us, high-fiving afterwards. And for a lot of the recipients, they look at the medal and all their friends are dead. And then now they're walking around getting treated special with their medal. So, they're wearing that medal a little bit differently than I do.
Mm.
And that's the guys you probably haven't heard him tell his Medal of Honor story because he doesn't like telling the story. And so everybody, every veteran's experience is unique. Every recipient, has their own little thing, and whether they like the story or whether they don't. And but you give a guy a couple beers, usually you can get a story out of him.
Yeah.
But it's a story that has to be told. And the fact that your story is going to be in books if it's not already. I mean, documentaries. Uh, People can literally read about what you did at any point now. You're going to be in this book with other recipients. There's going to be
Yeah.
someone who's going to study you and write a story, write a report, an essay. What is that feeling like? Being a hero. What is the feeling to someone who doesn't
I
know?
don't know. I tried to like what led me. I always grab my things. Okay, so people want to know, how did you do that? Why were you successful? And so what led? Why was I successful, and why did I do that? And because I started getting hit up by like NCO academies or have to do a combat leadership story, and so I get getting hit up by all these NCOs, and they're like, why did you do this and this and this, and there's not a for me there's not a great mysterious explanation of it. I went into the fight because that's my job. Um, did I have to? No, I could have stayed on the SF camp and met the metric for service, but I just thought that the Army and the American people spent kind of a lot of money training me to a really high level. So for me, if it's going to be a 19-year-old 11 Bravo on his first deployment walking point, or me walking point, well, that's going to be me. And I think to me I just felt that burden, and I was successful because the Army trained me to a very high level, and really the only thing that I brought to the table was the will to execute.
And I think that's a big defining difference. I mean, we saw guys when we were deployed in Iraq who didn't necessarily want to participate in the fight, and that's fine,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because like we talked about earlier, not everybody has that ability within them, and that's okay. But that is one of the things, and it's interesting to me that people are asking, well, why did you do this and why did you do that? When you especially when you know that the entire fight itself was a matter of minutes, right? So it's not like there was a ton of time for conscious thought. It was action reaction based on your training and your expertise and your knowledge of previous rotations and what you learned in the Marine Corps and what you learned in training and as a Green Beret. So to say like, well, why did you choose to do this, was because it was the thing that made the most sense in the moment, right? Like you kind of
Yeah.
go with the flow in combat.
And what I always kind of tell people, like any fight, right? People always want to learn to be the master pugilist who can win without getting hit. And then you go fight a guy and man, you get hit. And and most fights are over by whoever throws the first punch, because that's just how it is. And in a tactical situation, I'm not I'm not an officer. I don't ever have a giant map and move my pieces. So the only thing I provide on the battlefield was to clarify the tactical situation, and I can do that by when I find the enemy, just going after them, and then somebody else can look at the whole map and figure out what's going on.
Right.
And if you're waiting for that perfect time in combat, you're like, well, it's not. I need to understand what's going on better. Like, unless you were at the enemy's brief, you're never really going to understand what they're attempting to do until it's too late. So I just had my mindset from countless gunfights and deployments that when you see the enemy, you go after them.
Right.
Like, I decided that's how I was going to do it years beforehand.
So, and I don't mean to necessarily switch gears from all of this, because it's really knowledgeable. It's good stuff to learn, and it's good stuff for people to hear, especially people still serving, who will find themselves in some type of deployment or some type of combat scenario. But there's one thing that we had talked about in pre-show that you kind of wanted to talk about, and I want to get into that for sure, because I think it does need to be said. You were talking about team culture within the special forces groups, and all the stuff that was going on there with third group.
And it's uncomfortable. Nobody wants to to point out weaknesses in their community. I think it's important to talk about it. Because and if if you're watching, you don't know, we had an incident. We had a team out in third group. I don't think they've been. I think the jury's still out, but almost certainly there was some drug use and some affiliations with prostitution. Not cool things. And third group, everybody wanted to kick them when the story first came out. But I think the good news story is, we had one road team that was just doing some stuff that they lost their way, obviously. But they went on a witch hunt out there, and they didn't really find anything. They found one bad team. They found a little bit of drug use, but just minuscule. And there's always been a debate in our community of these witch hunts, because that's what we call them. You have one team falls off the moral wagon, and then they come through and just turn everything upside down. I think it's important because the American people should have an idealized image of what a special operator is, what special operations is, and when we fail to meet that metric, one of the ways we regain that trust is by hiking up our skirt and showing that, hey, yeah, we had a problem. It's not a widespread problem. And then the second question was, how did that happen? I don't know. I wasn't on that team, but I can see that we have the bones for some gross disciplinary issues. Because the teams are small, they stay together for a long time, and we train for a ton of things. I know exactly how to do almost anything that can happen on the battlefield, anywhere on the planet. But I think what people don't prepare for is when somebody's had your back, right? When you've been wounded and this guy refused to let off the throttle because he was going to get you out of there, and then he comes back and has a drug problem. Your first thought is not to cut him loose or to turn him in for discipline issues. You try to take care of him like he took care of you, and I think it's always a misguided effort. That a drug problem is such an insidious problem. It's not something a team can solve internally. It's just going to get worse until that guy lets you down, because chronic drug use, it is just a matter of time until he lets you down. And I think worst case scenario is that you end up with a team that has a drug culture. And I think that's what my suspicion is, that if you trace back how did an entire team chronically use drugs, I bet it's a 20-year war. You go back 10 years, I bet you the whole team didn't do drugs. So something happened, and then that became their culture. But we owe it to when we find those problems, be vicious about pairing them out and showing the American people they can trust us.
Yeah. Transparency.
Yeah. And transparency is not something we're comfortable with over here.
Right. Especially in the silent professional community.
Yeah.
And but you're right though. It is necessary. I mean, as a drill sergeant, when I train my trainees, when we teach them, right, one of the things that we try and do is say, hey, listen, you are now a United States Army soldier, hopefully, right? In 9-10 weeks from now, when you graduate basic combat training, you're going to be a soldier, and the civilian population is going to look at you differently. Like, they're going to expect you to be a certain way. They're going to expect you to walk a certain way and be respectful towards everybody and all things. And now you got to learn how to bite your tongue. You got to learn how to carry yourself better, be presentable to the public eye, because you represent the United States Army and Department of Defense and the United States of America. And that only gets that image of you only gets stricter and stricter, more strict as you move up in profession. Yeah. So there you are as a Green Beret, in the special forces group, and like, you know, the people that serve in the military look at you guys and say, oh my God, like these guys are it. These guys are the shit. And the people outside of the military, like, oh my gosh, the special forces, that must mean something because it's got the word special in it and the word force in it. And they wear a thing on their shoulder. It's really long. So it's got to be something important. And something like this
And
breaks, and you're like, oh shit. Like,
yep.
what are we doing? So yeah, transparency is a big thing.
Yeah, the fact that you can.
What is it? You build your reputation one grain of sand at a time, but you can tear it all down in a day.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's important that you guys were able to hold each other accountable for that too, because a
I
lot of
think that's
times they let investigations go on, and everyone else is like, "Hey, I had nothing to do with that. I don't really care, really." But it's good that self-policing is very important.
I think so, and because the first line of defense against any of those, it's the guys that are there on the ground. So if you're acting a certain way, and you need, like you need your sergeant major to come in and tell you how to act, like, well, that thing's broken, because you're the guys to your left and your right, that they should be the ones holding you accountable. So, and that's something I really noticed as I went kind of up my tier of elite units. Um, is in an elite unit, the sergeant major doesn't go around doing on the spot corrections. He doesn't have to, because the guys, the rank and file, hold themselves and each other to such a high level that by the time he's spotting something, like usually the whole area where he found this problem has discipline issues.
Right. Yeah.
But I like that. You save so much time in a unit like that, just not having to worry about silly, weird problems most of the time.
Most of the time, yeah. Yeah, and I can see that being I mean, again, as you move up, like you said, and move up into the elite tiers, you go Ranger and SF and the Delta guys, and all the other groups that are special operators in the other branches. I mean, there's this expectation, and I've heard that before too. Like I said, when we spoke with William Branham, the Navy SEAL, it was kind of the same thing. The team holds the teammates, the team members of the team accountable, and I will say, even in the regular conventional force, it should still be that way, right? Your battle buddy, hate that term, but your battle buddy should be holding you accountable, and you should be holding them accountable. It shouldn't get to the point where like your team leader, your squad leader, platoon sergeant, and so on have to step in and say, "Hey, y'all are fucked up," right?
Yeah.
It's your buddies to your left and your right. They should be like, "Hey, man, like maybe you don't do that," you know. Because if it escalates beyond that, then it's just, shit continues rolling on hill. And if it gets to the point where you're sergeant major, again, in the conventional force, when you're talking about like a battalion sergeant major over, fucking 400, 500 people, like if they're catching wind of this stuff and they're having to step in, man, first sergeants are messed up, all the E7s are messed up, the lieutenants are fucked up, and it's a big deal.
It's everyone else knows you're fucked up.
Yeah,
they're looking down on you.
Yeah, and then they're able to like to root you out and like, oh, turns out PFC fucking Joe Snuffy was over here being fucked up, and now the entire battalion is on lockdown for a 4-day weekend.
Yeah.
We can't go do anything.
No, yeah. Like, wow. I remember being in the infantry, and like I'd see stuff about to happen, and I didn't do anything about it.
Yeah,
because I was not my job. But then I was like, hey, that is my. You see the guy, and every unit has him. The guy, and it's Wednesday, and you see him carrying 2 30-packs and Natty Ice back to his barracks room. Like, maybe go intervene, because sure enough, when he shows up, fall down drunk, naked for formation, the whole everybody's catching hell, and you're like, man, this sucks. Well, yeah, it sucks because you let it suck.
Yeah, you saw it unfolding yesterday. Like, this is
I knew, I knew that there was no way that he was going to be fit for duty today, and I was like, well, not my problem, and now it's my problem.
Right. Well, yeah, and that's the thing. Is like, well, maybe it won't be my problem tomorrow. Maybe he'll show up to formation on time with his the right uniform on.
Yeah, maybe he will.
Yeah.
Probably not. And I think that was one of my kind of transition from amateur to professional soldier was when I was like, no, everybody that's around me is going to meet my standards of conduct. And um, that was a big change. I think from I'm here for my little short adventure to I'm staying here forever. So I need the organization to be a certain way.
Oh, and I can imagine, right? I can imagine not wanting to be that guy because it's the same in the drill sergeant community. It kind of is because we have to be this like image of the United States Army. Like, you know, when people think of the Army like, and they think of drill sergeants, like we're
They
supposed
think
to be
drill
this,
sergeant,
yeah, we're supposed to be the standard, and so we kind of have to hold ourselves. And you don't want to be that guy that is below the standard. You don't want to be that drill sergeant. They're like, oh, but you're fat, you know,
yeah.
or yeah, you don't look like you're capable, or you're on the trail, especially in the reserves, because we go on the trail and we work with our active duty counterparts and hey man, can you give a class on this thing? And and I've seen it, right? I don't really know that thing
That well.
yeah. So well, I mean, you're supposed to be an expert, a subject matter expert on all skill level 1 tasks. Like, how can you not talk
Well,
about rifle
all of them,
marksmanship?
but this one.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Oh, well, I mean, if you want to talk about 670-1, I can give a class on that all day long. It's like, well, yeah, but we're in rifle marksmanship right now. Like, we
Yeah.
gotta talk about that.
Great. That's not what we're doing today. Yep.
Yeah. Cool. You're useless. Thanks. Go away.
So, this has been an awesome show, and I'm always the one that has to start to bring things to an end. I hate to be the guy. I cannot thank you enough for taking the time out on, if you don't know this, Mother's Day weekend to chill out with us for a little bit and explain what you're about. It's not like you just told us a story. You told us who you are in a different way. You can get down with the best of them at any point. Anytime it gets spicy, you're ready. But at the same time, you're a leader and you understand the strength and the importance of team. And that's something that I really want people to understand, especially this month doing mental wellness. Uh, it's about the team, support your teammates. And man, I can't thank you enough for coming on.
No, thanks for having me, guys. It's been awesome.
Yeah, for real. It's a really cool story, and like you're an extremely humble person, and I appreciate that a lot because you hear when people get awards and and they they're very proud of their Bronze Star and the Silver Star, and they should be, but like don't let it go to your head. Don't let it be. You're still a person at the end of the day, and that's and the way you approach it, the way you tell the story is just you're human as fuck, and I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
It's relatable.
Thanks.
Yeah. Um, definitely a good dude. And thank you for coming on and thank you for telling your story. And again, happy Mother's Day to your guys' moms.
Yours too, man.
Yeah, wherever and all the other moms out there, I guess, even though it's not Mother's Day when you're watching / listening. But yeah, Earl, again, a thousand times thanks, man. This has been a really good opportunity for me because I'm kind of a groupie when it comes to, and I've said it before when we got to record with all these like dudes, like when we're recording with Mike Vining, one of the founding members of Delta Force. I'm like, I'm fangirling, right? Because I'm like, oh my god, this dude, right? And we're able to sit down and speak with you, so I'm definitely fangirling too right now. So it's been pretty rad. I appreciate it a lot.
No, thanks a lot.
Oh yeah.
All right, everyone. So thank you for listening to Before I Forget. Please like, listen, share, subscribe, watch, share. Thank you, Mr. Earl, for coming on here. It's an incredible time. Kevin, you got anything?
No, I already said my things.
Word. Have a good one. Thanks.
What? No. I hate it.